Thanks, Steve. Yeah, this was some work that the mesh team, as it was at the start of the year, did, because we, like probably everybody else, is under this stress of reduction in resources and less money in the university, and we can't afford to replace positions that are lost, etc., etc. So and this is something I've been trying to do for quite a while, is to just look at what happens to the students that we see in maths support. Are we making a difference to retention? And we're being told at Western Sydney at the moment that retention is the only word that matters, and it's the only thing that we should be looking at. We have to retain students. So
maybe just touch the screen because there's a focus. Which window it's focused on seems to be good.
There we go. Maybe I was just pressing the wrong button. So this study is part of a larger study that the university has on transition, which meant that it was somewhat easier for us to get ethics approval to get hold of the student results, at least to be allowed to get hold of the results. Actually getting hold of the results that we wanted, that was what we wanted out of the university data, was a whole other story, which probably took half or more of the time that we took in conducting the study. This was discussed yesterday by Leanne, that it's very difficult to get what you want out of university databases. So what we ended up getting was the data for all of the students who've been supported by mesh workshops over the, what's that, 7-year period, 2016 to 2022 inclusive, excluding a few students who'd opted out of the study. So the overarching ethics approval is an opt-out method. So if students don't want their data used, they have to opt out, which is fortunately means there aren't a lot. The data set, we have 22,856 students in that data set, covering 39,538 enrolments in 27 subjects over that period. So it's a reasonable sized data set to be analysed. We also, as well as getting the results for the subjects that mesh had supported, we also got their full enrolment history. Now, Maren checked last night, and a correction to what we said to Leanne yesterday, we do actually have the results of those students for all of their subjects. So we can look at more of what Leanne, somebody was asking about correlation between failures in maths and failures in other subjects. We do have that data, so that might be another fun thing to do in our time off. As far as we were concerned, the student was defined as using mesh. Mesh is the Maths Education Support Hub. If anyone's not familiar with that, that's the maths and stats support group at Western Sydney University. Students defined as using mesh if they've attended at least one workshop, or they've attended at least one maths and stats session. Attended maths and stats help at least once, which is what mesh is. And we've divided the students into those who use mesh and those who don't use mesh. And we're looking at the retention between those two groups. So firstly, and we used a lot of the demographic information to break down and see if there are particular groups that we're servicing more than others. So the first thing to notice is overall, we only see about 17% of students. Now, Leanne mentioned yesterday, and I think Maren mentioned a bit today, that students at Western Sydney tend to be more needy. We have higher low SES students, higher proportion of low SES, first and family language other than English students, and I think nearly anyone else. And students in maths really struggle. So only seeing 17% of them means there's a lot out there that could potentially be doing better than they are. So, see us. Obviously, these groups are not mutually exclusive, but these are the groups that we were most interested in looking at how maths and stats help affected their retention. So there are also some students who are aged under 18. It was so small a group that it wasn't significant, and so we lifted out of the analysis. There were also a few students over 50, but again, it was such a small group, we didn't look at it. The proportions of language other than English and low SES are about what they are for overall for the university. So around 30% or more are low SES, and language other than English, speak a language other than English at home is even higher. I think, Mary, do you remember how many language groups, how many languages there were? 100.
I'll look it up for you.
Yeah, it was huge. It was well over 100.
I'll get the figure up.
Yeah, other than that, I'll come back and talk about the disability group a bit later. It's not huge, but so we didn't get the results we quite expected. So in terms of those groups, what we looked at was attrition. We looked at the attrition because we're passing this data on to management, and to be perfectly honest, looking at the reduction in attrition, it looks a lot bigger than it does if you say that retention increased from sort of 85% to 92% or something. Doesn't look like a huge change, but if you look at it in terms of students lost, it seems to have a bigger effect. So overall, the attrition rate for maths and stats subjects that we support is somewhere around 13%. And for the students who attended MESH, who made use of MESH, that reduced to about 8%, which was really statistically significant. It means about 1.5 times as the odds ratio for a student dropping out, attriting, I hate that word, but attriting is about 1.5 times more if they don't make use of MESH. And you can see it, you know, it's consistent across all of the groups. The ATSI group, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander groups, the odds ratio is about 2.68. So an Indigenous student is 2.5 times more likely to drop out. So drop out of the university. We're not just talking about dropping out of a maths subject. We're talking about not re-enroll if they don't make use of the MESH services. That was fairly consistent across the years. For some reason, not significant in 2016, but consistent across every year since then. I also don't know why the attrition rate overall was so high. Well, maybe I do. 2022 was when we were coming out of COVID, and I think there was a lot going on. Again, I mean, in that year, MESH had an even higher impact, student retention. It's also, we also were able to show that this works across all maths backgrounds. So Leanne mentioned what these were. The unknowns, we've split the unknowns and the no HSC maths. So no HSC maths are students who've come into the university without having done HSC maths. In other words, their highest maths is year 10. Unknown are international students who've come into the university through a myriad of other pathways that we now have. Elementary maths is, in New South Wales, it's called standard maths. I'm not sure what it's called in other states, but that's the maths level which doesn't include any calculus. Intermediate maths is the basic calculus course, and higher maths includes in New South Wales Extension 1 and Extension 2, specialist maths in other states, but this is predominantly New South Wales students. Again, there's a significant effect at every level. And again, the largest one is no HSC maths, the students who are coming in with year 10. In a paper in 2019, Leanne and Intepe and I did some analysis of this, looking at how much students' marks improved based on their maths background and their interaction with mesh. We had 3 years of data to use for that, and what we saw there was that the students with no HSC maths improved significantly more. Their estimated average mark, if they made maximum use of mesh, was actually higher than the intermediate students who made maximum use of mesh. If anyone's interested in that paper, it's in the Delta Proceedings for 2019. I can find it for you if you'd like to see. We also looked at the effect by grade, and this one I think is interesting because the only area here that was a significant difference or a significant effect for mesh were the students who were failing. So the ones that we're retaining are the ones who are the most likely to drop out. The others, there's not a lot of difference. I mean, in some cases, there's a higher dropout rate from mesh, but it's not significant. And obviously expect from other areas. So the students that we're getting and the students that are being retained because of their use of mesh are the ones that are most likely to drop out, the ones who fail their subject and then potentially come back and pass it. Although also within this study, when we started to look at whether there was a mesh effect if students came to mesh after failing a subject once or twice, we didn't get anywhere with that, partly because of time. But one thing that we did find was, in amongst all that data, there were 2 students who'd attempted maths for engineers 11 times. I have no idea how they managed to stay at the university for that long, but that was the record. 11 times the subject was.
It's just
We've had students like that.
Yeah.
Do those students actually were part of mesh or not part of mesh?
I think in the end they may have been. I just don't actually remember if they
Fantastic.
after 10 times failing, they finally decided that they should come and see it. Anecdotally, I know we've had students in my maths for engineers preliminary subject. I've had students who failed it once or twice and have then realised, oh, actually, I need to do some work. They come to mesh almost every day to the online maths and stats help. They breeze through prelim and then they also pass Eng Maths 1 and Eng Maths 2 at one attempt. But I mean, that's anecdotal. That's, half a dozen students. Here we're looking at the 22,000 students that we've got.
22.
One thing that I didn't mention back here was the disability. The change in disability, the retention for disability students was not statistically significant. But there's a couple of things to think about with that. Number one, disability, what does that mean? From the university point of view, a student has a disability if it's physical or if it's a learning disability. And there's possibly not a lot that we can do to help students with physical disabilities. Also, students with learning disabilities quite often come to university not knowing that they have a learning disability. In fact, one of the things that we do as part of maths and stats help would be to sometimes advise a student to go to the student wellbeing, student disability services and get themselves assessed, because we can see that they may potentially have some sort of learning disability, which also feeds into the talk on AI, because that's something that AI is never's a pretty hard thing to say with AI these days, but it's unlikely that that's going to be able to, it'll be able to do that anytime soon. So what do we get from this? Well, as I said, students who don't use mesh are 1.5 times more likely to be attrited than those who do. That odds ratio rises to 2.56 for average Torres Strait Islander students, and 1.5 is obviously an average, so it's all around that area. We would estimate, I don't think we estimated, I think we had 200 and we count 252 students who were retained by the university over that 7 years due to the interaction. Well, who interacted with Mesh, who if they hadn't interacted probably would have dropped out. That's about 35 to 40 students a year, 8 subjects per student per year. These are mostly first year subjects, so they're probably retained for another 3 years. About $4,000 a subject. I'll leave you to do the maths as to just how much we're saving the university from students that are dropping out, not to mention the cost of obtaining new students, because anyone in marketing will tell you it's much higher cost to get a new customer than to retain a current one. So even for what should be a team of 6 at Western Sydney, that's still a pretty decent return on investment on what it's costing, on what we're costing the university. It shows that there is a good business case. And we only see 17% of students. So there's a potential for a lot higher savings if we could convince the university that they should be marketing this more to students. Now, before somebody asks the question, yes, you're right, association is not causation. And when we presented these results to our new Pro-Vice Chancellor, the first thing he said was, oh yes, but you might just be getting all the students who would have been retained anyway. Which was, yeah, really made us feel good. Anyhow, we also survey students at the end of each semester, ask about whether they found Mesh useful, what they got. Again, that gets a horribly low response rate. Of the 184 students who completed the satisfaction surveys over that time, 53% said they wouldn't have gone anywhere else if Mesh hadn't been available. Those who would have sought help would have gone to their lecturer or asked their peers. A very small proportion would have engaged a private tutor because, again, most of our students are low SES, that's not an option for them. So, at best, we would have put more work on the lecturers learning from their peers. Whilst we encourage students to learn from their peers, it's possibly not ideal if they're looking for help. 50% of the students said that the support they received helped them to improve their grade. 63% said that what we did helped them to increase their confidence. So again, it doesn't prove causation, but it's a bit more effective. This paper, this is written up in a paper which is currently under publication. So that's the story. I'm happy for the